It was never meant to go public. Not like this. Not with headlines screaming, Blake Lively accuses Baldoni of harassment, and late-night hosts dissecting their red carpet chemistry like a crime scene. For months, they had been the face of something beautiful. It Ends With Us wasn't just a film. It was supposed to be a movement, a powerful adaptation of a novel about trauma, healing, and strength. And Blake, America's sweetheart, Ryan Reynolds' better half, the woman who could light up a room with a glance, was the beating heart of it. But on a rainy afternoon in January 2025, the world cracked open. Blake's legal team filed a 137-page complaint in the Los Angeles Superior Court, alleging that director Justin Baldoni, the man Hollywood often praised for his sensitive masculinity, had repeatedly crossed boundaries on set. The claims were chilling: inappropriate remarks, gaslighting behind the scenes, and a coordinated effort to label her as unstable when she pushed back. At first, no one knew what to believe. Justin Baldoni had built a career on empathy. He was the face of emotional storytelling, a self-proclaimed feminist who gave TED Talks about men being better men. His tearful interviews were viral sensations. But Blake's documents included testimonies from stylists, assistants, even a junior producer who said, every time Blake spoke up, the energy shifted. You could feel the power being used to silence her. It wasn't just whispers anymore. It was evidence. The production of It Ends With Us had already been marred by delays, rewrites, budget disputes, COVID-era scheduling nightmares. But what no one saw was the war waging just behind the curtain. According to the complaint, Blake had asked multiple times to revise scenes she believed were exploitative or not aligned with the novel's original tone. Baldoni allegedly pushed back hard, insisting they needed cinematic intensity. At first, she relented. Then she resisted. And that's when, Blake claims, the retaliation began. Tabloids suddenly had anonymous sources whispering about Blake being difficult to work with, erratic, even emotionally fragile. Blake's team traced those leaks to an internal source tied to Baldoni's PR rep. In one email, allegedly from a member of the post-production team, someone wrote, "She's about to get buried under 1,000 perfect headlines about him. Let's help it along." Then came the tipping point. During an intimate scene that Blake had specifically asked to rework, she walked off set mid-shoot. Cameras were rolling. Baldoni allegedly told the crew to keep recording. "If she walks," he said, "let's get that too. It might be usable." Blake, furious and humiliated, quit the set that day. She never returned. Publicly, Baldoni said nothing for a week. Then he dropped the hammer. In a countersuit filed in February 2025, he accused Blake of orchestrating a deliberate media takedown of his character, reputation, and career. He demanded $400 million in damages, citing brand deals lost, future projects canceled, and the total derailment of It Ends With Us, which had now been shelved indefinitely. And just like that, the internet was on fire. Team Blake, Team Baldoni, hashtags, think pieces, TikToks. But in the quiet, behind all the noise, something else was brewing, something far more personal. Because beneath the Hollywood headlines and legal jargon was a painful story of two people who once trusted each other, who once stood on the same stage, believing in the same message. Now, they were preparing for war, and it would all come to a head in March 2026. The silence between them was deafening. Behind closed doors, both teams were preparing for war, combing through hours of raw footage, emails, private messages, and signed NDAs. But to the public, the storm had only grown stronger. Every late-night monologue, every gossip panel, every think piece ended with the same question: what the hell happened between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni? And more importantly, who was telling the truth? Blake's side doubled down. They released a brief but damning video montage from behind-the-scenes footage, just enough to cause a stir, not enough to breach contracts. It showed her clearly distressed after a rehearsal. A voice off camera, allegedly Baldoni's, can be heard saying, "You don't want to do it? Then don't be here. I'll find someone who will." The clip was viewed 19 million times in 24 hours. Justin's attorneys fired back the next morning with a signed letter from multiple crew members claiming the quote had been edited out of context and that the tension stemmed from creative disagreements, not harassment. He also appeared on a primetime interview, polished, composed, holding back tears, and said, "I have always stood for women's voices. But my voice matters too, and it's being silenced by an accusation I swear is false. America was torn. Blake was quiet. For nearly 2 weeks, she said nothing, no interviews, no statements, no social posts. Paparazzi camped outside her New York apartment, catching glimpses of her with her daughters, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by Ryan Reynolds, whose face remained stern, lips sealed. And then came the deposition leaks. 34 pages leaked to the press, marked confidential. In it, Blake detailed how she felt systematically undermined during the final 2 weeks of production. She named producers who allegedly looked the other way and claimed that notes sent to her trailer would arrive rewritten, sanitized, by Baldoni's team to gaslight her into thinking she was overreacting. One page hit especially hard. She wrote, "Every day I came to set wondering who I had to fight today to keep my integrity intact. I wasn't asking for luxury, I was asking to feel safe telling a story about trauma without being re-traumatized myself." It was raw, unpolished, real. Suddenly, Hollywood wasn't so divided anymore. Actresses began to quietly repost her quotes. Anonymous testimonies started appearing online, former crew members from other Baldoni sets, hinting at a pattern of emotional volatility masked as passion. A showrunner who had once worked with him on a Netflix pilot tweeted, "I've seen it. She's not lying." The tweet was later deleted, but not before it got over 200,000 likes. Justin Side panicked. That week, they filed a motion to suppress the leaked documents and issued a cease and desist to 3 major news outlets. But the damage had already been done. Sponsors began to distance themselves. A wellness brand pulled out of a collaboration. His next film deal, a streaming biopic on Fred Rogers, was quietly frozen. And all the while, Blake waited. Because she knew this wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about her. It was about the system, how quickly it praised you when you were quiet, and how violently it punished you when you dared to speak. But she wasn't backing down. Not this time. The courtroom was still weeks away, but the battlefield was already littered with casualties. Reputations. Friendships. Careers. When the Screen Actors Guild finally issued its first statement, the language was cautious, but clear. "We are actively monitoring the allegations involving Ms. Lively and Mr. Baldoni. We stand by our members' right to a safe and respectful workplace." Neutral on the surface. But to Hollywood insiders, it was a warning shot. Behind the scenes, Blake's legal team prepared for deposition day like it was war. They brought in digital forensic experts, subpoenaed private text chains, and collected video footage from on-set monitors, footage they claimed had been scrubbed before being released to post-production. One particular clip changed everything. It showed Blake sitting alone on a prop staircase during a rehearsal break. She's wiping her face with a tissue, clearly upset. Baldoni approaches. He's pacing, animated. No one speaks until he leans in and whispers something into her ear. Her face drops. Her whole body shifts. She gets up and walks off. There's no audio, but lip readers were hired. The phrase Baldoni allegedly whispered, "You know this role will break you. Why not just break now?" The internet detonated. It wasn't just the implication of psychological manipulation, it was the precision of it. The cruelty. People who had once been silent began to talk. A costume designer anonymously confirmed, that was the day everything changed. You could feel it in the air. She was never the same after that. Then came the bombshell. A former PR strategist who had worked briefly with Baldoni's team submitted a sworn affidavit. In it, she detailed a crisis meeting held weeks before the film's production halted, where top advisors allegedly mapped out a containment strategy in case Blake goes nuclear. The plan included pushing out soft-hit pieces about her emotional state and prepping testimonials from minor crew to defend Baldoni's creative process. But it wasn't over. Blake wasn't just relying on her own testimony anymore. She had a secret witness. An associate producer, formerly loyal to Baldoni, had flipped. In a sealed deposition, they confessed that Blake had been pressured to complete a scene she explicitly rejected, and that the director had threatened to pull financing if she didn't comply. The producer described it as emotional blackmail dressed in method directing. The testimony was damning. Baldoni's legal team scrambled. They tried to discredit the producer's statement, calling it a bitter attempt at relevance, but the court allowed the testimony to remain in the record. That same week, 3 film festivals removed Baldoni's name from their keynote events. Suddenly, the story shifted. The man once dubbed Hollywood's sensitive soul was now facing a full-blown image collapse. Talent agencies began to reconsider. Lawyers suggested settlement talks. Even friends who had once defended him fell silent. But Blake? She stayed visible. She showed up at a women's mental health fundraiser. Smiling, soft-spoken, but unshakable. During her brief speech, she didn't name anyone, But the room knew. There's no award for surviving quietly, she said. But there is a cost for speaking, and I've decided I'm willing to pay it. Those words? They went viral in hours. And by now, even the people who once doubted her were starting to believe. The morning of the hearing felt like Hollywood held its breath. Photographers lined the courthouse steps. Reporters whispered theories. And when Blake Lively stepped out of the black SUV, dressed in simple navy with her hair pinned back like armor, the crowd fell silent. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She walked like a woman with something to finish. Across the street, Justin Baldoni arrived 5 minutes later, surrounded by his legal team, sunglasses low, jaw tight. The man who once spoke on vulnerability now stood stone-faced, a monument of denial. Inside, the room buzzed with tension. No cameras. No audience. Just sworn testimony, legal briefs, and the raw electricity of truth-meeting power. Blake took the stand first. She didn't cry. She didn't falter. Instead, she told the story with brutal clarity. She spoke of being gaslit, of crying in her car between takes, of second-guessing her instincts because she didn't want to be labeled uncooperative. She described moments when she had to pretend to feel safe, because the script said so, even when everything in her gut screamed no. And then she paused, and said something no one expected. This isn't just about me. It's about how we treat women who say no. How we punish silence with obscurity and punish speech with war. The judge called a brief recess. When court resumed, Baldoni took the stand. His voice was steady, but something was missing. The charm. The empathy. The rehearsed vulnerability that once made him beloved on daytime TV. Instead, he repeated the phrase, "I never intended harm," like it was a prayer he barely believed in. But the cross-examination unraveled him. Text messages surfaced, ones his team fought hard to keep sealed. In them, he refers to Blake as a liability and a PR risk. One message to a producer reads, "If she won't play nice, we'll freeze her out." The room turned cold. When it ended, both teams declined to speak to the press. The judge delayed a full ruling until March 2026, citing the complexity of the evidence and emotional toll on all parties. But the damage was already done. Studios distanced themselves from Baldoni. Multiple brand deals collapsed overnight. Activist groups issued statements in support of Blake. Even her harshest critics online began issuing apologies. The tide had shifted, and this time, it wasn't going back. In the weeks that followed, Blake returned home to upstate New York. She stayed quiet, refusing interviews, avoiding appearances. Not because she was hiding, because she was healing. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to explain herself. As for Baldoni, his production company entered internal restructuring. The It Ends With Us project was shelved permanently. Industry voices quietly began replacing his name on shortlists. The truth didn't just come out. It roared. And in the wreckage of one of Hollywood's most carefully crafted facades, a woman stood tall, shaken, but unbroken.